The first one that's coming up is Secret Invasion, which I remember hearing the name from comic books, but I never read any sort of Secret Invasion stuff. So what is Secret Invasion in the comic world to prep us for what's coming in the shows and movies?
Yeah, so, when we were talking about Joe Quesada coming in and saving Marvel in a lot of ways and bringing them out of bankruptcy, his big thing was, how do we save the Avengers? And Brian Michael Bendis, who had kind of exploded into the Marvel world with Ultimate Spider-Man, revamps that character for the Marvel comics, especially when that first film is coming out. He's sitting down and he's saying, well, let's look at the Avengers. This is like our crown jewel. And at that point, they kind of had like some third, fourth stringers on the Avengers. And so he starts off his business being, well, who should be on the Avengers? We should have the best of the best. We need Captain America and Iron Man. I think Thor was maybe dead at the time. But they brought in Spider-Man. They brought in Luke Cage. They brought in Wolverine. And then I believe they had some other characters like maybe Spider-Woman.
Okay.
And there's a couple of others that I'm forgetting. But I think the idea behind Brian Michael Bendis' Avengers this needs to be our best characters. This needs to be, our flagship book.
Okay.
And so you get probably, I think, 20 or 30 issues into Brian Michael Bendis' run when a character shows up and they are killed, but as they're killed, their body turns into a scroll. Now, if you recall, we saw the scrolls, they're shape-shifting aliens. We saw them in Captain Marvel. Their big thing is they could be masquerading as anybody, and you really have to know the person to really trust them. And a scroll who's impersonating someone might mess up a detail, but they can be anyone, they can look like anyone. And so Secret Invasion was a book where, we just found a dead body and it turned into a scroll. Well, now I don't know who to trust. If this person who I thought was themselves ended up being a scroll, anybody could be a scroll. So this idea of paranoia and who do I trust, and you could be a scroll, and how well do you know the person that you're impersonating, became a big crossover story in Marvel Comics. So the Skrull Empire, which was a very religiously inclined Skrull Empire, wanted to take over Earth, felt that Earth was part of their kind of religious crusade. They had impersonated a number of key Marvel characters, mainly Sue Richards, and I believe there were a couple others, but they tried to stay away from the big characters for the most part.
Okay.
And yeah, just playing on kind of like a Red Scare paranoia. Do I trust you? Are you who you say you are? And so I think that will not look the same way it did in the comics, because in the comics it was a big crossover event where you saw all of the Avengers tie-in books with all of the other characters. I think it's going to be much smaller. So we might see Nick Fury and Maria Hill, who we've seen interact with Skrulls. We'll probably see a couple of other characters that they can manage that are maybe like B or C list, who will show up on those Disney Plus shows. But we'll mainly see Skrull characters and how they're trying to infiltrate Earth in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So again, when we look at these big titles and we see that they're big crossover books or crossover events that involve all of these main characters, you got to hamper your expectations and go, it will be the skeleton of that story, but it's not going to be the same thing. They're going
to change it. But it does sound like there's a good opportunity to get some of those kind of up-and-coming characters, since we've kind of got a new MCU now after Endgame, to kind of get some more screen time and some more bigger parts to become more integral.
And also, there's, and yeah, exactly. Look at these titles. Like, for instance, we'll talk about a couple of titles that have been stolen from books in a second, but Age of Ultron, the second Avengers film, got its name from a Brian Michael Bendis crossover story, and it doesn't really resemble that story, but, a strong title, and, drive sales back to that book when the movie comes out. So, right. They know what they're doing, and I think fans at this point know, or should know, don't expect that same story when you go to the theater. So,
right.
And also, the Secret Invasion gives us one of the final pieces of the Young Avengers puzzle. Now,
okay.
I'm not sure if you are familiar with Young
Not
Avengers. There's been a couple of different iterations, but some of that team is comprised of legacy characters like Cassie Lang, who is Scott Lang, Ant-Man's daughter, Kate Bishop, the Hawkeye we met on Hawkeye. Iron Lad, who is a version of Kang, the Conqueror.
Oh, okay.
Asgardian, who is Billy Kaplan, or Billy, who is Wanda Maximoff's son.
Yeah.
Patriot, who is the grandson of Isaiah Bradley, who we met in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then a couple of other characters here and there. There's a kid Loki. Okay. So we saw a child or a kid version of Loki on the show. So they're kind of got all the pieces to do a Young Avengers book based on some of the characters that we've seen. And the final character that we haven't met as of yet, in terms of at least the original crew, is Hulkling, which is a teenage version of the Hulk, who's actually, I believe, half Skrull and half Kree. And Kree was the alien race that Carol Danvers was training with and carrying out missions with in the first Captain Marvel film. Gotcha. So he potentially could show up in Secret Invasion, and I think that's maybe Feige's big plan for the Disney Plus shows, is that eventually we are going to have Young Avengers. I think that's just a matter of time before we hear that announcement, maybe at D23.
If you like this video, like and subscribe. If you really like this video, visit synergylovescompany.com for the full audio podcast.